The void between stars was never truly empty. Commander Xerwind of the Xerion Ascendancy knew this better than most. His command throne pulsed with the slow, rhythmic heartbeat of his living battlecruiser, Emerald Tide, its biomechanical hull thrumming with photosynthetic energy. The ship's veins glowed emerald, feeding off the faint starlight as it drifted through the dead system. This sector was a graveyard. Once, it had been a thriving trade route, a nexus of civilizations. Now only wreckage remained. Twisted husks of ships, their metal bones picked clean by scavengers. The war had seen to that, the war and the myth that had started it. Xerwind's secondary eyes flickered as he studied the tactical holo. Ursek, his chief scientist, stood beside him, her bioluminescent frills twitching in unease. Still no sign of them. Xerwind pulsed through the neural link, his voice a vibration in the shared consciousness of the bridge. Ursek's tendrils coiled tight. None scans show only debris. If they ever existed, they are long gone. The Terrans, a dead species, a cautionary tale. The galaxy remembered them as reckless, violent, a race that had burned too bright and too fast. Their wars had been legendary, their defiance of the Ascendances, edicts even more so. And then, silence. No transmissions. The Ascendancy had declared them extinct, a relic, a myth. Xerwind had believed it, a flicker on the edge of the sensor web. His primary eyes snapped to the display. A distortion, no, a shadow, moving against the void, too large to be debris, too deliberate to be natural. Ursek's frills flared in alarm. Something is out there. The Emerald Tide's organic systems reacted before the crew could, its photosynthetic veins dimming, its pulse slowing to near, undetectable levels. Instinctive camouflage, Xerwind's blood ran cold, the shadow resolved into shape, but not like any he had ever seen. No pulsing bioluminescence, no vine, like growth patterns, no living metal. This was cold, a dagger of blackened steel, its surface scarred by ancient battles, its hull pockmarked by weapons fire that had failed to kill it. And at its prow, etched in faded white paint, a single word. Ursek's voice was a whisper in the neural net. That's impossible. Xerwind's grip tightened on his command throne, because he knew that name, every Xerion did. The Valkyrie had been the flagship of the Terran Armada, the vessel that had defied the Ascendancy's ultimatum, the ship that had laughed as it burned. And yet here it was, not a ghost, not a myth. Then the scanners pulsed again, and the void ripped open. One ship became 10. 10 became 100. A fleet emerging from the darkness like wolves from a forest. Their engines silent, their weapons already primed. At the center of them all, the Valkyrie turned, its prow aligning with the Emerald Tide. A single transmission cut through the silence. No words, no demands, just a sound, a heartbeat. Unrelenting, Xerwind realized, with dawning horror, what this was. Not an encounter, not a first contact, a reckoning, and the galaxy was not ready. The void between the fleets was not empty. Xerwind's neural interface painted the space in pulsing yellow-green biosignatures, the Emerald Tide sensors mapping every fragment of cosmic dust, every drifting hulk of forgotten wreckage. But now, the darkness was alive with something else. Human ships, not sleek, not elegant, not grown from the living architecture of Xerion design. These were brutal things, all sharp angles and scarred armor. Their hulls pitted from battles older than some civilizations. They moved like predators, no, like veterans. Every maneuver precise, every adjustment deliberate. No wasted energy, no hesitation, and at their heart, the Valkyrie. Xerwind's secondary heart stuttered as the scans resolved. The flagship was wrong. Its spine was broken. Its once proud superstructure twisted and reforged into something jagged, asymmetrical. It shouldn't have been space-worthy, and yet it hung there, defiant its prow, a blade aimed at the tide's throat. Ursek's voice slithered through the neural net. his bioluminescent frills flaring with distress. Their energy signatures. Captain, they're not using fusion, not even antimatter. These readings. Xerwind already knew. The humans had brought something worse. The Valkyrie's reactors burn with the cold fire of singularity cores, black holes caged in magnetic vice grips, their event horizons humming with contained fury. The power output was obscene. The risk was unthinkable. And yet the humans had done it. Because of course they had. A flicker of movement. The human fleet shifted, not in formation, but in unison, as if guided by a single mind. Then the Valkyrie's weapons array activated, not with the graceful pulse of bioplasma, not with the organic thrum of Xerion energy lances, with a sound like bones breaking, mass drivers, kinetic kill rods. The galaxy had long since abandoned such primitive weapons, too slow, too easily intercepted. But the humans hadn't just kept them, they had perfected them. The first rod left its launch tube at a fraction of light speed, then the second, then the third. By the time Xerwind's tactical net screamed a warning, it was already too late. The rods didn't hit. They arrived. The lead projectile struck the tide's forward shield matrix, and the biobarrier shattered, not from overload, but from sheer kinetic transfer. The impact sent fractal cracks spiderwebbing through the living shield generators, their photosynthetic cells hemorrhaging energy. The second rod punched through the hull. The third missed. On purpose, Xerwind's neural feed flared with panic as the projectile whipped past the tide's flank, only to reverse thrust with impossible precision, its engines flaring as it circled back. Ursic's frills went rigid. They're using debris as guidance markers. The first impacts are painting targets for the rest. The fourth rod struck the tide's primary reactor housing. The fifth hit the command spire. The sixth didn't fire. Instead, the Valkyrie pulsed its engines once, a silent challenge. Xerwind understood. This wasn't an extermination. It was a demonstration. The humans had just shown them how easily they could end this. And now they were waiting to see if the Xerion were smart enough to surrender, or proud enough to die. The void held its breath. And in the silence, the Valkyrie's heartbeat thundered on. The silence was worse than the impacts. Xerwind's neural tendrils flickered with residual static, his body still thrumming from the near miss of the third kinetic rod. The tide's luminescent systems pulsed erratically. Their usual emerald glow dimmed to a sickly amber, like a wounded beast bleeding light into the void. Across the bridge, Ursic's frills remained rigid, his normally fluid movements frozen as he processed the human's precision. They could have killed us. The thought slithered through Xerwind's mind, cold and undeniable. The rods had struck with surgical accuracy. Reactor housing, command spire, propulsion nodes, each impact calculated to cripple, not destroy. A message written in fire and physics. And now the human warship loomed before them, its angular hull a jagged silhouette against the stars. The Valkyrie, a name dredged from Xerion archives, from half-remembered legends of a species supposedly extinct, yet here it hung in the void, its engines humming with restrained power, its weapons silent but waiting. Ursic finally stirred, his voice a whisper. Their targeting systems. They're using the debris field as a lattice. Every impact feeds them data, adjusts their trajectories. His claws trembled as he pulled up a holographic replay, the third rod's flight path twisting mid-course, correcting as it skimmed past the tide's flank. They don't just predict, they adapt. Xerwind's secondary heart clenched. Adaptation was a Xerion virtue. Their living ships grew new armor, their bioenergy networks rerouted damage. But this was something else. The humans hadn't evolved to survive. They had engineered survival. A chime cut through the tension. The Valkyrie was hailing them. For a breathless moment, Xerwind hesitated. Pride warred with pragmatism. The Xerion Dominion had ruled this sector for cycles unchallenged. To surrender now would unravel centuries of supremacy. But the alternative was annihilation. He opened the channel. The holographic display flickered to life, and Commander Saravala stared back at him. Her face was a study in controlled fury. Pale skin etched with scars that spoke of battles fought in vacuum and gravity alike. Dark eyes that held no mercy, only calculation. She wore no ceremonial garb, just a battered flight suit, its seams reinforced with patches from a dozen campaigns. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, deadly. You have 10 seconds to power down your weapons. Behind her, the Valkyrie's bridge was a stark contrast to the tide's organic curves. Cold metal, blinking tactical displays, a crew moving with the efficiency of machines. And in the corner of the feed, a figure in black armor, Sergeant Adam Jackson, his visor reflecting the glow of targeting data. Xerwind's frills flattened. This wasn't just a warship, it was a reckoning. Ursek's claws tapped frantically at his console. Their energy signatures, Captain. They're not just running weapons, they're broadcasting. A new window bloomed in the hologram, a signal, pulsing outward in all directions. Not a distress call, a declaration. The humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were making sure the entire galaxy remembered they existed. And as the transmission propagated, carried on stolen Xerion relay nodes, bouncing from system to system, Xerwind realized the truth too late. This wasn't a battle, it was a show. And the Valkyrie had just turned the void into its stage. Section Fae, Rod from God, the tide of Xerion shuddered as its luminescent shields flared against another barrage. The human warship Valkyrie moved with predatory grace, its angular hull slicing through the void like a blade. Xerwind's frills pulsed with agitated hues of emerald and amber, colors of distress in Xerion biology. This was not how the engagement was supposed to unfold. The humans were supposed to be relics, ghosts, a species erased from the galactic record. Their civilization dust beneath the roots of the great Xerion dominion. Yet here they were, weapons hot, their ship a monolith of cold steel and calculated fury. Ursek's voice crackled through the organic comms. Node, his usual scientific detachment fraying. Captain, their energy signatures, they're cycling something new. Xerwind's claws tightened around the command vine. The Valkyrie had already proven its lethality. Plasma lances carving through living armor, railgun salvos, punching holes in the tide's photosynthetic shielding. But now, deep within the human vessel's belly, something darker stirred. A proximity alert shrieked. The tactical holo display flickered, its vine like tendrils writhing as it recalibrated. A new contact, not a missile, not a drone, a tungsten spear, 20 meters long, ejected from the Valkyrie's ventral launch array. No propulsion, no guidance systems, just mass, just velocity. Just the inevitable pull of gravity amplified by human engineering. Xerwind's frills went rigid. The rod fell. It shouldn't have been possible. In the void, projectiles required thrust to reach their targets. But the humans, clever, vicious humans, had accounted for that. The Valkyrie's railgun had imparted enough kinetic energy to turn the rod into a hypersonic javelin, its trajectory unerring, its impact inevitable. Ursek's claws scrambled across his console. Shields want. The rod struck. The tide of Xerion screamed. Organic plating buckled. Photosynthetic energy webs ruptured in cascading failures, their yellow-green luminescence flickering like dying stars. The rod didn't explode. It didn't need to. At that velocity, physics did the work, shearing through decks, gutting chambers, turning biomechanical systems into shrapnel. Xerwind's vision swam as the deck lurched. Alarms warbled in dissonant harmony, their tones warped by the ship's pain. Through the fractured holo display, he saw the Valkyrie holding position, watching. No, not just watching, transmitting. The humans were broadcasting the tide's death throes across every open channel, letting the galaxy see, letting them remember. Ursek staggered to his feet, his carapace streaked with leaking biofluid. "They're not just killing us," he rasped. "They're making an example." Xerwind understood now. The humans hadn't returned for revenge. They'd returned to teach, and the lesson was simple. You forgot us. That was your mistake. Outside, the void burned with the tide's dying light. The Valkyrie lingered a moment longer, a silent executioner ensuring the message was received before its engines flared. Turning toward the next Xerion outpost, the transmission continued. The galaxy would bear witness. The Valkyrie cut through the void like a blade through flesh, its matte black hull drinking in the starlight. Behind it, the wreckage of the tide still pulsed with dying embers, its organic superstructure collapsing in on itself like a gutted beast. The broadcast continued. Every flicker of the dying ship's bioluminescence, every sputtering discharge of its failing power core, captured in perfect, merciless detail. Commander Saravala watched the feed from the bridge, her fingers steepled beneath her chin. The glow of the holographic display painted her face in cold blue, etching shadows into the scars that marked her. Trophies from a war the galaxy had tried to forget. "They thought we were gone," she mused, her voice barely above a whisper, erased, a cautionary tale buried in their archives. Her reflection in the viewport showed a woman carved from vengeance. But this wasn't rage. Rage was fire, wild and consuming. This was ice, calculated, precise. Behind her, Sergeant Adam Jackson adjusted the feed's resolution with a flick of his wrist. His cybernetic eye whirred softly as it parsed the data streams. Xerion distress signals, intercepted fleet chatter, the panicked scramble of their command structure. "They're waking up," he said. Sarah's lips curled. "Good. 3 light years away." The Xerion command nexus convulsed like a wounded hive. High Commander Xerwind's transmission had reached them, not as a plea for aid, but as a warning. A declaration. The war chamber pulsed with sickly yellow-green light, its walls alive with biotech veins that throbbed in time with the nexus panic. Ursik stood at the central console, his chitinous fingers trembling over the holographic displays. The data was impossible, unthinkable. The humans hadn't just survived, they'd evolved. Their ships bore no resemblance to the crude vessels of the old wars, no trace of the lumbering dreadnoughts or fragile fighters. The Xerion had crushed centuries ago. The Valkyrie was something else, a predator forged in the dark, its design stripped of all weakness. No organic components, no biosignatures to track. Just cold, dead metal and weapons that defied reason. Ursek's mandibles clicked in agitation. "They've inverted our doctrine," he murmured. Where Xerion ships relied on living armor, self-repairing, adaptable, the human vessel was a slab of impenetrable alloy. Where Xerion weapons fired bio, plasma searing flesh and synapse alike, the humans had built kinetics. Rods of tungsten accelerated to a fraction of light speed, punching through shields and hulls like paper. No elegance, no artistry, just force. On the Valkyrie's gunnery deck, Sergeant Jackson ran a hand along the railgun's charging array. The weapon hummed beneath his touch, capacitors groaning as they fed power into the magnetic coils. "They won't expect this," he muttered. The Xerion had spent millennia perfecting energy shields, layers of bio-electric resistance designed to diffuse plasma, scatter lasers, absorb particle beams. They had no defense against a 2-ton rod moving at Mach Fay Jackson's. Grin was sharp. Let them learn. The Valkyrie emerged from the jump point with the silence of a reaper. Before the Xerion outpost could scream, before their sensors could so much as ping, the railgun fired. The rod struck the outpost's central spire. For a single suspended moment, nothing happened. Then the world bent. The impact didn't explode. It displaced. The kinetic energy vaporized the spire's base, sending the entire structure collapsing inward before the shockwave rippled outward, shearing through bio-armor like a scythe through wheat. The outpost's core detonated seconds later, its photosynthetic reactors overloading in a burst of emerald fire. Sarah watched, unblinking, as the light washed over the Valkyrie's hull. Again, she said, the galaxy would learn, one ruin at a time. Section. Faye. Shields don't mean shit. The Xerion Battlecruiser Emerald Tides had been a legend among the celestial growth. A living warship grown from the heart of a neutron star's accretion disk, its hull woven from photosynthetic alloy that healed faster than any weapon could damage it. Its commanders had never lost a battle. Its crew had never known fear. Until today, Xerwind's fronds trembled as the tactical display flared crimson. The human vessel, Valkyrie, their translated systems spat, was not behaving like a warship. It moved like a predator. No evasive maneuvers, no shield cycling, just relentless, arrow-straight advances, closing the distance with terrifying indifference to the Emerald Tide's volleys of bioplasma. Ursek's voice crackled through the neural link, his bioluminescence flickering erratic lime. Their armor, it's not dispersing our fire. It's eating it. The molecular structure. Xerwind didn't let him finish. The human ship's railgun was charging again. On the Valkyrie's bridge, Sarah Vala watched the alien vessel's panicked maneuvers through the tactical holodisplay. The Xerion were graceful, their ship twisting in elegant arcs, vines of emerald energy lashing out to reposition. Beautiful and utterly pointless. Sergeant Jackson's voice cut through the silence. They think this is a duel. Sarah didn't answer. The railgun's capacitors hummed, a sound like a tectonic plate grinding against bone. The Emerald Tide's shields were a masterpiece of engineering, a lattice of photosynthetic energy that could absorb and redistribute the force of a supernova. The Xerion had faced particle lances, antimatter warheads, even singularity projectors. They had never faced physics. The tungsten rod struck the shield at fake. For a nanosecond, the shield held. Then the energy web shattered, not from overload, but from raw, undiluted kinetic transfer. The shield didn't fail, it evaporated, the bioenergy screaming as it was punched straight through like paper. The rod didn't stop. It struck the cruiser's starboard growth node, and the organic metal splashed, molten biomass erupting in a geyser of amber and emerald. Xerwind's fronds went rigid. The damage reports flooded his neural feed. Structural collapse in 11 sectors. Photosynthetic reactors hemorrhaging energy. The ship's living core wailing in pain. Ursek was whispering, his voice hollow. They didn't even aim for the bridge. Jackson leaned back in his harness as the Valkyrie's railgun cycled again. The targeting reticule didn't bother with weak points. It painted the Emerald Tide's center mass. Shields, he muttered, are just another thing to break. Sarah's fingers tightened around the command rail. The galaxy had forgotten the weight of human wrath. Today, it would remember. The Emerald Tides reeled, its biomechanical hull convulsing like a wounded beast. Amber ichor, half blood, half coolant, spewed from ruptured conduits, crystallizing instantly in the void. The Xerion Battlecruiser wasn't just damaged, it was violated, its elegant organic symmetry shattered by the crude, brutal efficiency of human kinetics. Xerwind's neural feed burned with damage reports. His ship's pain was his own bioluminescent warning sigils flaring across his vision. The deck beneath him shuddering as secondary growth. Nodes detonated in chain reactions. The humans hadn't targeted the bridge. They hadn't even bothered with precision. They had simply pointed at the heart of his ship and punched. Ursek's fronds trembled as he parsed the data. The rod hadn't just penetrated. It had plowed, its hypervelocity impact turning the cruiser's living armor into vapor and shrapnel. The Xerion's entire philosophy of war was built on elegance, on energy weapons that dissected foes with surgical grace. But this was barbarism, a sledgehammer to a scalpel fight, and it was working. On the Valkyrie's bridge, Sarah Vala watched the tactical feed with cold satisfaction. The Xerion cruiser's shield harmonics had been beautiful, shimmering photosynthetic energy webs that adapted to disperse plasma and particle beams. But Kinetics didn't care. A tungsten rod moving at Feifei carried the same indifference as a meteor strike. "Reload," she said. The railgun's capacitors whined, magnetic coils glowing cherry, red as they prepped another rod. The targeting AI didn't bother calculating shield dispersion or weak points. It didn't need to. The Emerald Tides was a floating cathedral of delicate biotech. Its structure optimized for energy dissipation, not impact. Sarah's lips curled. The galaxy had spent millennia perfecting the art of energy shielding. Humanity had spent the same time mastering throwing rocks really, really hard. Xerwind's command fronds lashed as he struggled to stabilize the tides. The damage control drones, elegant, vine-like constructs, scurried to seal breaches. But the wounds were too deep. The human's first shot had crippled the primary growth, node cluster, and now the ship's regenerative systems were choking, struggling to repair what shouldn't have been possible to break. Ursek's voice was hollow. "They're not even... High Commander, they're not even firing at our weapons." Xerwind understood. This wasn't a duel. It wasn't even a battle. It was a demonstration. The Valkyrie's railgun fired again. This time, the rod struck the Emerald Tide's ventral spine, the thick, root-like structure that housed its photosynthetic reactors. The impact didn't pierce. It splintered, the force ripping through the organic latticework like a bullet through wet paper. Alarms shrieked. The ship's bioluminescence flickered, then dimmed. Xerwind felt it, the tide's pain, its terror, its confusion. This wasn't how war was waged. This wasn't honorable. On the view screen, the human vessel loomed, its angular armor, plated silhouette, a grotesque mockery of Xerion elegance. Sarah Vala's voice crackled over the comms, calm and utterly merciless. "Yield or we'll teach you about gravity next." The Emerald Tides shuddered, and for the first time in Xerion history, a living ship whimpered. The Emerald Tides did not surrender, not in words, not in any way the Xerion High Command would recognize, but Xerwind felt it in the way the ship's pulse faltered, in the way its bioluminescent veins dimmed, their glow reduced to a sickly, flickering ember. The great vessel, a living testament to Xerion ingenuity, had been humbled, and the humans had barely even tried. Ursek's tendrils trembled as he processed the data. His voice, when it came, was a whisper of disbelief. They didn't even use their full yield. Xerwind turned, his own frills stiff with shock. Ursek gestured to the holographic readout, where the last kinetic rod's impact was still calculating. The numbers made no sense. The humans had fired a projectile capable of cracking continents, yet they had held back. Deliberately, "This wasn't an attack," Ursek murmured. "It was a calibration." The realization settled over the bridge like a suffocating fog. The humans weren't just stronger, they were measuring them. On the Valkyrie, Commander Sarah Vala watched the Xerion cruiser's distress signals flicker across her tactical display. The Emerald Tides was wounded, its photosynthetic reactors hemorrhaging energy, its once graceful form now listing in the void like a dying beast. She felt no satisfaction, only cold clinical assessment. "They still don't understand," she murmured. Beside her, Sergeant Jackson exhaled sharply, his fingers flexing over the firing controls. "Want me to correct that?" Vala didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied the Xerion ship, its organic curves, its pulsing veins of yellow-green energy, the way its hull shivered as if recoiling from their very presence. "No," she said at last. "Let them report back," Jackson frowned. "They'll just come back harder." Vala's lips thinned. The armistice request came within the hour. It was a formal, stilted transmission, laced with Xerion pride and barely concealed terror. The Emerald Tides would withdraw. The humans would not pursue. A ceasefire. Xerwind nearly choked on the word. This was no truce. It was a reprieve, and the humans had granted it not out of mercy, but because they wanted the Xerion to run, to warn the others. Ursek understood first. His frills flattened in dawning horror. "They're not just fighting us," he whispered. "They're studying us." Xerwind's blood ran cold, because the truth was worse. The humans weren't just studying them. They were teaching, and the lesson had only just begun. The Xerion armada arrived in waves, not as a single unified force, but as a creeping tide of yellow-green bioluminescence against the void. Their ships pulsed with organic energy, their hulls flexing like living things as they emerged from the quantum slipstreams. Xerwind stood on the bridge of the emerald tides, his frills rigid with tension. The human fleet had not moved. They waited, silent and dark, their silhouettes jagged against the distant starlight. Ursic's claws trembled against the console. "They knew we would return," he murmured. Of course they knew. The humans had let them flee, and now they would answer for it. Commander Sarah Vala watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The Xerion had brought reinforcements, dozens of their sleek, vine-wrapped battlecruisers, their photosynthetic energy webs, glowing brighter as they prepared for war. They moved with the slow, deliberate grace of predators who had never known defeat. Let them think this was just another battle. Let them believe they still held the advantage. Sergeant Adam Jackson cracked his knuckles beside her. "They really don't learn, do they?" Vala didn't answer. She didn't need to. The first volley came from the Xerion. Brilliant lances of yellow-green plasma arced across the void, splashing against the human fleet's shields in bursts of searing light. The energy dissipated harmlessly, absorbed by layers of reactive armor designed for far worse. Vala's lips curled. The human fleet moved. Not in retreat, not in defense, but in formation. The Terran warships, once dismissed as crude, brutish things, unfolded like a blade from its sheath. Their engines flared, not with the soft glow of Xerion bioenergy, but with the raw, unfiltered burn of controlled fusion. And then they struck. The first kinetic rod hit the lead Xerion cruiser like a god's hammer. There was no explosion, no fire, just impact. A tungsten spear the size of a skyscraper punched through the ship's organic hull, shearing through layers of living metal as if they were wet paper. The cruiser buckled, its spine snapping under the force, before its own energy cores destabilized in a silent, green-white detonation. Ursic's frills went flat against his skull. They're using projectiles. Xerwind's blood turned to ice. Not just projectiles, ancient weapons, refined to perfection. The humans had brought rocks to a battle of energy beams, and they were winning. The second volley came before the Xerion could react. Dozens of rods streaked through the void, unerring, unstoppable. Each one found its mark, shattering Xerion hulls with terrifying precision. Their living ships screamed, not in sound, but in the way their bioluminescence flickered and died. Their organic systems torn apart by sheer kinetic force. Jackson grinned. "Told you they'd never see it coming." Vala didn't smile. She watched as the Xerion fleet scattered, their formations breaking apart in panic. Their commanders had expected a battle of energy and shields, of calculated exchanges of fire, not brutality, not annihilation. Xerwind's claws dug into the command console. This wasn't war. This was butchery, and the humans weren't even trying. Ursic's voice was hollow. They could have done this from the start. They could have, but they hadn't, because this wasn't just about victory. It was about teaching, and the lesson was clear. You do not underestimate humanity twice. The sky burned green with dying ships, and the humans watched, silent, for the next mistake. The void was quiet now. Not the silence of emptiness, but the stillness that follows a storm. The kind of quiet that hums with the echoes of what has been. The wreckage of the Xerion fleet drifted in broken arcs, their once gleaming bioluminescent hulls, now dark, their pulsing yellow-green energy webs extinguished. The remnants of their living ships curled inward like dying leaves, their organic, metal skeletons twisting in the cold vacuum. Commander Sarah Vala stood on the observation deck of the Indomitable, her hands clasped behind her back. The battle had been over for hours, but the weight of it still pressed against her ribs. She had seen war before, countless times, across countless stars. But this had been different. This had been personal. Behind her, the mess hall was alive with a low murmur of human voices. Laughter, sharp and bright, cut through the hum of conversation. They were celebrating. They had earned it, but Vala did not join them. Her gaze lingered on the wreckage. Somewhere in that graveyard of alien technology, Xerwind still lived. She knew it. The Xerion commander was too stubborn to die so easily. And that was the problem. She had wanted them to understand. Not just fear, not just defeat, understanding. The kind that settled in the bones and stayed there. The kind that made a species reconsider every assumption they had ever held. She exhaled, slow and controlled. Had it worked, or had she only taught them to hate humanity more? Inside the mess hall, Sergeant Adam Jackson raised a glass. The room fell silent, not because he commanded it, but because they all knew what this moment meant. The veterans, the ones who had fought in the dark years, the ones who remembered Earth's fall, understood better than anyone. Jackson's voice was rough, but it carried. To the dead, 100 glasses lifted. To the living, 100 more. And to the bastards who'll learn the hard way. The laughter that followed was edged with something darker, something older. It wasn't just victory they toasted. It was memory. It was vengeance. It was the unspoken promise that humanity would never be erased again. Jackson's eyes met Vala's as she finally stepped into the room. She didn't smile, but she raised her glass. And that was enough. Ersic watched the human transmission in silence. The Xerion scientist had expected gloating threats, perhaps even the chilling declaration of total war. Instead, the humans had broadcast a single image, a glass raised in the dim light of their warship, surrounded by faces both young and old. No demands, just acknowledgement. Ursic's tendrils, coiled tight. That was the most terrifying thing of all. The humans weren't celebrating their victory. They were mourning. And a species that mourned its dead never forgot. Xerwind's claws scraped against the ruined console of his escape pod. The battle was over. The war was not. He had seen the humans now, truly seen them. Not as the scattered remnants of a broken civilization, not as the desperate survivors the galaxy had dismissed, but as soldiers, as monsters, as something that should never have been awakened. His mandibles clicked in a sound that might have been a laugh, if it weren't so hollow. The lesson had been taught. Now, the galaxy would learn. The void remained silent. But the echoes of humanity's return had only just begun to spread. The signal pulsed through the quantum relays like a heartbeat, a single burst of data tearing through the galactic communications web. It bypassed encryption protocols, ignored firewalls, and bloomed across every screen, every holoprojector, every comms array in known space. The galactic news network had never been hacked before. The image that flickered to life was grainy at first, static, laced and distorted, before resolving into the unmistakable silhouette of a human warship. Its hull was scarred, pitted with the remnants of battle, but its prow remained unbroken, jutting forward like a blade. Behind it, the wreckage of Xerion vessels drifted in a slow, silent ballet of defeat. Then the human commander appeared. Sarah Vala's face was gaunt, her dark eyes sunken with exhaustion, but her voice was iron. "This is Commander Vala of the Terran Remnant Fleet." The words were translated instantaneously, fed through stolen Xerion linguistic matrices, but the weight behind them needed no translation. "You thought we were gone. You thought you had erased us." A pause, a breath. "You were wrong." The screen split. On one side, the battle footage, human ships, outnumbered 100 to 1, weaving through the Xerion formation like wolves, through a herd. Kinetic rods punched through living armor, detonating in bursts of white fire, boarding pods latched onto hulls, and then the humans came. Not as refugees, not as victims, as butchers. Sergeant Adam Jackson's squad moved in perfect sync, their armor blackened by plasma burns, their rifles barking in controlled bursts. They didn't just fight, they hunted. The other half of the screen showed something else. Row upon row of human corpses laid out in the hangar bays of their ships. Old men, young women, children. The galaxy had forgotten that humans buried their dead. Now they would remember. Ursic's lab was silent. His tendrils had gone still, his bioluminescent patterns dim to near invisibility. The data scrolling across his organic displays told him everything he needed to know. The humans hadn't just won the battle. They had stolen the war. The broadcast wasn't a declaration, it was a reckoning. And the worst part, it wasn't even encrypted. The humans wanted the galaxy to see. Xerwind's escape pod drifted in the dark, its systems barely functional, its hull groaning under the strain of damaged integrity fields. He watched the broadcast on a cracked view screen, the image flickering in and out of focus. His mandibles twitched, not in anger, in understanding. The humans hadn't just returned. They had planned this. Every defeat, every retreat, every moment. The galaxy had laughed at their weakness, their desperation. It had all been leading here, to this moment, to this message. And now, as the broadcast ended, as the screen faded to black, a single line of text burned itself into the minds of every species that had ever doubted humanity. We remember. The void remained silent. But the galaxy screamed. Xerwind's escape pod drifted through the debris field like a corpse caught in the tide of battle. The wreckage of the Xerion armada stretched for thousands of kilometers, twisted spires of living metal, severed mechanical tendrils still pulsing with fading emerald energy, the shattered remnants of once proud warships now reduced to floating tombs. His pod's oxygen recycler hissed, struggling to compensate for the damage. The air smelled of scorched organic circuits and something else, something human, the scent of ionized metal, of burning tungsten and spent gunpowder, clung to the wreckage like a ghost. He watched the last echoes of the human broadcast flicker across his cracked screen. We remember. The words lingered, searing themselves into his mind. Ursec had been right. They had all been wrong. The humans had not merely survived their supposed extinction. They had evolved. They had taken their rage, their grief, their vengeance, and forged it into something the galaxy had never seen before. A war machine without mercy, a fleet without fear. A species that did not forget. Xerwind's claws flexed against the pod's control panel, his bioluminescent veins dimming in the gloom. He had commanded fleets, he had crushed rebellions, he had stood before the High Synod and declared humanity a relic, a footnote in the grand history of the galaxy. Now he floated in the dark, listening to the silence. A silence that would not last, because the humans were not done. This was not a victory broadcast. This was a promise. Beyond the wreckage, beyond the dead. A shadow against the stars, a shape too vast, too wrong, to belong to any known design. Xerwind's breath caught. The humans had not come with a fleet. They had come with a weapon, and it was still out there. The galaxy had believed itself safe. It had believed the war was over. But the humans were just beginning. The pod's damaged sensors flickered, struggling to lock onto the anomaly. For a single terrifying moment, Xerwind saw it clearly, a monstrous silhouette, its hull lined with scars of ancient battles, its prow carved with symbols no living Xerion could read. And then, as if sensing his gaze, it turned. Toward him, toward the wreckage, toward the heart of the galaxy. Xerwind's mandibles parted in something that was not fear. Not anymore. It was acceptance. The humans had returned. And the next war would be theirs. The pod systems failed. The screen went dark. And in the silence of the void, the galaxy held its breath. For the storm to come, additional section. The silence did not last. Deep within the wreckage of the Xerion command ship, a single emergency beacon flickered to life. Its signal weak, distorted, but persistent. It pulsed through the void, a dying creature's final gasp, carrying with it a warning, a plea, far across the galaxy, on the amber-lit spires of the Xerion homeworld. The signal was received. The High Synod convened in the Chamber of Echoes, their bioluminescent veins dim with dread as the data unfolded before them. The battle recordings, the human ship, the impossible defiance of their deadliest weapon. One elder, her carapace cracked with age, turned to the others. "We were wrong." The words hung in the air, heavier than the gravity of a collapsing star. They had believed the humans broken. They had believed them gone. But the humans had never been gone. They had been learning. And now, as the signal repeated its desperate warning, the Synod understood the truth. This was not a war they had ended. It was a war they had awakened. Outside the chamber, the skies burned with the light of distant stars. Stars that, even now, might be hiding more of those silent, watching shadows. The galaxy had thought itself safe. It had thought the humans defeated. But the humans remembered, and they did not forgive. The beacon's signal faded at last. The chamber fell into silence once more. But this time, it was the silence before the storm.